Chapter 4 Maharishi Vashishta approached the fort gates of Ayodhya, followed by his bodyguards at a respectful distance. As the guards on duty sprang to attention, they wondered where the great Raj Guru, the royal sage of Ayodhya, was headed early in the morning. The chief of the guards bowed low, folded his hands into a namaste and addressed the great man of knowledge respectfully, Maharishiji. Vashishta did not break a step as he nodded in acknowledgement with a polite namaste. He was thin to a fault and towering in height, despite which his gait was composed and self-assured. His dhoti and angastram were white, the color of purity. His head was shaven bare, but for a knotted tuft of hair at the top of his head which announced his Brahmin status. A flowing, snowy beard, calm, gentle eyes, and a wizened face conveyed the impression of a soul at peace with itself. Yet, Vashishta was brooding as he walked slowly towards the massive Grand Canal that encircled the ramparts of Ayodhya, the impregnable city. His thoughts were consumed by what he knew he must do. 6 years ago, Ravan's barbaric hordes had decimated the Sapt Sindhu army. Though its prestige had depleted, Ayodhya's suzerainty had not thus far been challenged by other kingdoms of North India, for every subordinate kingdom of the empire had bled heavily on that fateful day. Wounded themselves, none had the strength to confront even a weakened Ayodhya. Dashrath remained the emperor of the Sapt Sindhu, albeit a poorer and less powerful one. The pitiless Ravan had extracted his pound of flesh from Ayodhya. Trade commissions paid by Lanka were unilaterally reduced to a tenth of what they had been before the humiliating defeat. In addition, the purchase of goods from the Sapt Sindhu was now at a reduced price. Inevitably, even as Lanka's wealth soared, Ayodhya and the other kingdoms of North India slipped into penury. Why, rumors even abounded that the streets of the demon city were paved with gold. Vashishta raised his hand to signal his bodyguards to fall behind. He walked up to the shaded terrace that overlooked the Grand Canal. He raised his eyes towards the exquisite ceiling that ran along the canal's entire length. He then ran his gaze along the almost limitless expanse of water that lay ahead. It had once symbolized Ayodhya's immense wealth, but had begun to exhibit signs of decay and poverty. The canal had been built a few centuries ago, during the reign of Emperor Ayuthayas, by drawing in the waters of the feisty Saraya River. Its dimensions were almost celestial. It stretched for over 50 kilometers as it circumnavigated the third and outermost wall of the city of Ayodhya. It was enormous in breadth as well, extending to about 2.5 kilometers across the banks. Its storage capacity was so massive that for the first few years of its construction, many of the kingdoms downriver had complained of water shortages. Their objections had been crushed by the brute force of the powerful Ayodhyan warriors. One of the main purposes of this canal was militaristic. It was, in a sense, a moat. To be fair, it could be called the moat of moats, protecting the city from all sides. Prospective attackers would have to row across a moat that had river-like dimensions. The adventurous fools would be out in the open, vulnerable to an unending barrage of missiles from the high walls of the unconquerable city. 4 bridges spanned the canal in the 4 cardinal directions. The roads that emerged from these bridges led into the city through 4 massive gates in the outermost wall: the North Gate, East Gate, South Gate and West Gate. Each bridge was divided into 2 sections. Each section had its own tower and drawbridge, thus offering 2 levels of defense at the canal itself. Even so, to consider this Grand Canal a mere defensive structure was to do it a disservice. The Ayodhyans also looked upon the canal as a religious symbol. To them, the massive canal, with its dark, impenetrable and eerily calm waters, was reminiscent of the sea, similar to the mythic, primeval ocean of nothingness that was the source of creation. It was believed that at the center of this primeval ocean, billions of years ago, the universe was born when the one, Ekam, split into many in a great Big Bang, thus activating the cycle of creation. The impenetrable city, Ayodhya, viewed itself as a representative on earth of that most supreme of gods, the one god, the formless Ekam, popularly known in modern times as the Brahman or Paramatma. It was believed that the Paramatma inhabited every single being, animate and inanimate. Some men and women were able to awaken the Paramatma within, and thus become gods. These gods among men had been immortalized in great temples across Ayodhya. Small islands had been constructed within the Grand Canal as well, on which temples had been built in honor of these gods. Vashishta, however, knew that despite all the symbolism and romance, the canal had, in fact, been built for more prosaic purposes. It worked as an effective flood control mechanism, as water from the tempestuous Sarayu could be led in through control gates. Floods were a recurrent problem in North India. Furthermore, its placid surface made drawing water relatively easy, as compared to taking it directly from the Sarayu. Smaller canals radiated out of the Grand Canal into the hinterland of Ayodhya, increasing the productivity of farming dramatically. The increase in agricultural yield allowed many farmers to free themselves from the toil of tilling the land. Only a few were enough to feed the massive population of the entire kingdom of Kosala. This surplus labor transformed into a large army, trained by talented generals into a brilliant fighting unit. The army conquered more and more of the surrounding lands, till the great Lord Raghu, the grandfather of the present Emperor Dashrath, finally subjugated the entire Sapt Sindhu, thus becoming the Chakravarti Samrat. Wealth pouring into Kosala sparked a construction spree. Massive temples, palaces, public baths, theaters, and marketplaces were built. Sheer poetry in stone, these buildings were a testament to the power and glory of Ayodhya. One among them was the Grand Terrace that overhung the inner banks of the Grand Canal. It was a continuous colonnaded structure built of red sandstone mined from beyond the river Ganga. The terrace was entirely covered by a majestic vaulted ceiling, providing shade to the constant stream of visitors. Every square inch of the ceiling had been painted in vivid colors, chronicling the stories of ancient gods such as Indra, and the ancestors of kings who ruled Ayodhya, all the way up to the noble Ikshvaku. The ceiling was divided into separate sections, and, at the center of each, was a massive sun, with its rays streaming boldly out in all directions. This was significant, for the kings of Ayodhya were Suryavanshis, the descendants of the sun god, and just like the sun, their power boldly extended out in all directions. Or so it had been before the demon from Lanka destroyed their prestige in one fell swoop. Vashishta looked into the distance at one of the numerous artificial islands that dotted the canal. This island, unlike the others, did not have a temple, but 3 gigantic statues, placed back to back, facing different directions. One was of Lord Rama, the creator, one of the greatest scientists ever. He was credited with many inventions upon which the Vedic way of life had been built. His disciples lived by the code he'd established, relentless pursuit of knowledge and selfless service to society. They had, over the years, evolved into the tribe of Brahma, or Brahmins. To its right was the statue of Lord Parshuram, worshipped as the 6th Vishnu. Periodically, when a way of life became inefficient, corrupt or fanatical, a new leader emerged, who guided his people to an improved social order. Vishnu was an ancient title accorded to the greatest of leaders, idolized as the propagators of good. The Vishnus were worshipped like gods. Lord Parshuram, the previous Vishnu, had many centuries ago guided India out of its age of Kshatriya, which had degenerated into vicious violence. He'd ushered in the age of Brahman, an age of knowledge. Next to Lord Parshuram, and to the left of Lord Brahma, completing the circle of Trinity, was the statue of Lord Rudra, the previous Mahadev. This was an ancient title accorded to those who were the destroyers of evil. The Mahadevs was not the task to guide humanity to a new way of life, this was reserved for the Vishnu. His task was restricted to finding and destroying evil. Once evil had been destroyed, good would burst through with renewed vigor. Unlike the Vishnu, the Mahadev could not be a native of India, for that would predispose him towards one or the other side within this great land. He had to be an outsider to enable him to clearly see evil for what it was when it arose. Lord Rudra belonged to a land beyond the western borders of India, Pariha. Vashishta went down on his knees and touched the ground with his forehead, in reference to the glorious Trinity who were the bedrock of the present Vedic way of life. He raised his head and folded his hands in a namaste. "Guide me, O Holy Trinity," whispered Vashishta. "For I intend to rebel." A sudden gust of wind echoed around his ears as he gazed at the triumvirate. The marble was not what it used to be. The Ayodhya royalty wasn't able to maintain the outer surface anymore. The gold leafing on the crowns of Lords Brahma, Parshuram and Rudra had begun to peel off. The ceiling of the terrace had paint flaking off its beautiful images, and the sandstone floor was chipped in many places. The Grand Canal itself had begun to silt and dry up, with no repairs undertaken. The Ayodhya royal administration was probably unable to budget for such tasks. However, it was clear to Vashishta that not only was the administration short of funds for adequate governance, it had also lost the will for it. As the canal water receded, the exposed dry land had been encroached upon with impunity. The Ayodhyan population had grown till the city almost seemed to burst at its seams. Even a few have been unthinkable that the canal would be defiled years ago, it would be defiled that new housing would not be constructed for the poor. But, alas, many improbable had now become habitual. "We need a new way of life, Lord Parshuram. My great country must be rejuvenated with the blood and sweat of patriots. What I want is revolutionary, and patriots are often called traitors by the very people they choose to serve, till history passes the final judgment." Vashishta scooped some mud from the canal that was deposited on the steps of the terrace, and used his thumb to apply it on his forehead in a vertical line. "This soil is worth more than my life to me. I love my country. I love my India. I swear I will do what must be done. Give me courage, my lord." The soft rhythm of liturgical chanting wafted through the breeze, making him turn to his right. A small group of people walked solemnly in the distance, wearing robes of blue, the holy color of the divine. It was an unusual sight these days. Along with wealth and power, the citizens of the Sap Sindhu had also lost their spiritual ardor. Many believed their gods had abandoned them. Why else would they suffer so? The worshippers chanted the name of the sixth Vishnu, Lord Parshuram. Ram, Ram, Ram Bolo, Ram, Ram, Ram. Ram, Ram, Ram Bolo, Ram, Ram, Ram. It was a simple chant, speak the name of Ram. Vashishta smiled, to him, this was a sign. "Thank you, Lord Parshuram. Thank you for your blessings." Vashishta had pinned his hopes on the namesake of the sixth Vishnu, the 6-year-old eldest prince of Ayodhya, Ram. The sage had insisted that Queen Kaushalya's chosen name, Ram, be expanded to Ramchandra. Kaushalya's father, King Hanuman of South Kosala, and mother, Queen Maheshwari of the Kurus, were Chandravanshis, the descendants of the moon. Vashishta thought it would be wise to show fealty towards Ram's maternal home as well. Furthermore, Ramchandra poetically meant pleasant face of the moon, and it was well known that the moon shone with the reflected light of the sun was the face and the moon its reflection. Who, then, was responsible for the pleasant face of the moon? The sun. It was appropriate thus. Ramchandra was also a Suryavanshi name, for Dashrath, his father, was a Suryavanshi. That name's guided destiny was an ancient belief. Parents chose the names of their children with care. A name, in a sense, became an aspiration, swadharma, individual dharma, for the child. Having been named after the sixth Vishnu himself, the aspirations for this child could not have been set higher. There was another name that Vashishta had placed his hopes on, Bharat, Ram's brother, younger to him by 7 months. His mother, Kakeyi, did not know at the time of the great battle with Ravan that she was carrying Dashrath's child in her womb. Vashishta was aware that Kakeyi was a passionate, willful woman. She was ambitious for herself and those she viewed as her own. She had not settled for the eldest queen, Kausalya, being one up on her by choosing a great name for her son. Her son, then, was the namesake of the legendary Chandravanshi emperor, Bharat, who had ruled millennia ago. The ancient emperor Bharat had united the warring Suryavanshis and Chandravanshis under one banner. Notwithstanding the occasional skirmishes, they had learned to live in relative peace, a peace that held. It was exemplified today by the Emperor Dashrath, a Suryavanshi, having two queens who traced their lineage to Chandravanshi royalty, Kausalya and Kakeyi. Ashwapati, the father of Kakeyi and the Chandravanshi king of Kakaya, was in fact the emperor's closest advisor. One of the two names will surely serve my purpose. He looked at Lord Parshuram again, drawing strength from the image. I know they will think I'm wrong. They may even curse my soul. But you were the one who had said, my lord, that a leader must love his country more than he loves his own soul. Vashishta reached for his scabbard, hidden within the folds of his angastram. He pulled out the knife and beheld the name that had been inscribed on the hilt in an ancient script, Parshuram. Inhaling deeply, he shifted the knife to his left hand and pricked his forefinger, puncturing deep, to draw out blood. He pressed the finger with his thumb, just under the drop of blood, and let some droplets drip into the canal. By this blood oath, I swear on all my knowledge, I will make my rebellion succeed, or I will die trying. Vashishta took one last look at Lord Parshuram, bowed his head as he brought his hands together in a respectful namaste, and softly whispered the cry of the followers of the great Vishnu. Jai Parshuram! Glory to Parshuram!